Nate Larkin, founder of the Samson Society, author of Samson and the Pirate Monk, and notable speaker on the topic of pornography within the church, will continue the conversation about how to talk about pornography in this up-and-coming video. Let's hear from a man who has himself spoken about porn from many pulpits.
Let's face it, talking about porn from the pulpit is not easy. And there are plenty of people who would say that it's not appropriate. That certainly was the opinion as I was growing up. I never heard porn mentioned in church. It wasn't easy to avoid the sexual themes that run throughout the Bible, but we managed to do it. And that silence in itself sent a powerful message. By the time I saw porn for the first time, I knew I couldn't tell anybody. And even as the urge began to build, I knew I was going to have to learn to resist it on my own. Well, that was a different time. Porn is now unavoidable, ubiquitous. It's gone mainstream. It's everywhere. And as we stand in the pulpit on Sunday morning and look out at that congregation, the truth is that very, very few people out there in the pews are not affected in some way, directly or indirectly, by porn. Whether it's the child whose innocence has been shattered by early exposure, we know that first exposure to porn now is somewhere between 8 and 12, and not just the kind of porn that I saw as a kid, but the hardcore porn that I didn't see until I was a married man. Perhaps it's the insecure adolescent who's battling depression or gender confusion as a direct result of their daily porn use. Or the single young person who's lonely, for whom porn has become a comfort and, in all too many cases, a gateway to hookup apps. Maybe it's one of the 30% of males age 18 to 35 who today are suffering from what the urologists are starting to call porn-induced erectile dysfunction. Maybe it's the man or the woman in a sexless marriage in which porn has become both the comfort and the cause of emotional disconnection. Porn will be cited as a factor in 60% of divorces. And that's not to mention the 1 in 3 women or the 1 in 5 men who has experienced some sort of sexual abuse, something that's often linked to pornography. It isn't obvious, but it's there. The guilt, the shame, the silent pain, the secret suffering of parents and children, husbands and wives. Now, I'm not suggesting that you need to devote a sermon series to pornography, or even a sermon. But what I am saying is that we need to bring it up, to acknowledge reality, and to do so in a gracious way that pushes back against shame and exposes the wound to the healing power of the gospel. So how do we do it? The temptation is to merely preach against porn, to focus on abstinence, to just say, porn is bad, just don't do it. Well, it's true, porn is bad, but there are problems with this message. First of all, for many in today's audience, and I would be so bold as to say for most in today's congregation, it's too late. They've already sampled the poisonous fruit. They've acquired a taste for it. Now they are mired in guilt and shame. And our message of abstinence, if it isn't leavened with grace, only drives them deeper into hiding. It's also dangerous for those who have not acquired a porn habit, because this message runs the risk of creating Pharisees, judgmental people who imagine that somehow, because they are not using porn, they're morally superior to those who do. That attitude can create a toxic environment in your church, a fake fellowship, one in which people are forced either to pretend that they're okay or to leave. The alternative is to embrace the biblical narrative around sexuality. First of all, to stop pretending that sexuality is anything other than a glorious part of God's design. Right from the beginning, He made us male and female, and sexual themes run throughout all of Scripture. Secondly, the fall is real, and all of us have been affected by it on a sexual level. Our brokenness takes different forms, but none of us is fully enjoying the innocent intimacy of sinless sexuality. But still, this isn't God's primary concern. It might be ours, but it's not His. What are the 7 things that God hates? Those that are listed in Proverbs chapter 6. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, false witness who pours out lies, or a man who stirs up dissension among brothers. Sexual sin doesn't even make the list. The truth is, it's possible for us to discipline our sexual behavior and still be guilty of adultery. Jesus made that point very forcefully. What's worse, when we're congratulating ourselves for our moral purity, we can actually be sinning against love in 100 other ugly and destructive ways. Let's take Jesus as our model. One thing that was so striking about Jesus' ministry was that He was unfailingly kind to the sexually broken. I'm particularly struck by the story of the woman of the well. Here was a woman who came to draw water in the middle of the day, not in the morning when the rest of the women came. She was alone, she was a social outcast, and quite clearly because of her sexual history. Now, Jesus didn't avoid the issue. He brought it up, He named it. But He did it in such a non-judgmental way that she heard nothing but acceptance. And she got so excited. She wasn't offended. She got so excited that she rushed back into town saying, "Come meet the man who told me everything I ever did." One Sunday during the morning service, Pastor Scotty described how it feels to watch a pornographic image crawl down the screen. That very sentence told me a couple of things. First of all, my pastor knew what it was like to look for porn. It also told me that he apparently hadn't done it since dial-up. But that comment, as small as it was, it sent a message. It told me that the pastor was somebody who was safe for me to talk to. Eventually, I did have that conversation with Scotty in his office, and I told him my story. I also, at his request, gave him my phone number and permission for him to pass on that number to anybody he thought I could help. That's how the Samson Society started. In summary, let's start acknowledging the elephant in the room, even from the pulpit. But let's do so in a realistic, loving, low-key way that opens the door to confession. It opens the door to surrender and connection and healing.